Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Welcome back, everybody. All right, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but it was an interesting little aftermath regarding the Ohio primary and the days following the Ohio primary, certainly at the latter half of last week and then into the weekend. Apparently, you had a few staffers who volunteered to work for Casey Puch's campaign, basically throwing him under the bus, saying again that they would make suggestions to him and that he wouldn't take the suggestions and a number of other things. In a moment like that, it's difficult to figure out what's true and what's not. None of it was really very salacious of any kind. He didn't abuse anybody. He didn't steal money. It wasn't anything like that. It would just be a comment that he would apparently make from time to time, according to these former staffers. And again, none of it was really terrible. Some of his staffers would look at him and say, hey, man, maybe ease up on Donald Trump a little bit. You know, you're trying to win this. And then Casey would say, look, we're not going to win. I fully know that. So let's use the opportunity to educate people instead, and a number of other things. So again, it's difficult to understand or follow all of the gossip after a particular primary. The point is this, and this is really the only part that I honestly care about. If you look at the different candidates again and the way that they managed themselves during their campaign, you can clearly see the machine against the individual. You can see the machine work against the individual. They ignore the individual. They act like the individual isn't there. They act like the individual isn't even running for office. And as I've said in the past, that's remarkably insulting, and it should be insulting to every American. The part that should also be insulting, not just to every American, but every Ohioan, is the fact that, again, Vivek Ramaswamy and Amy Acton are not only two heads of the same snake, but they operated exactly the same when it came to the COVID lie. They perpetuated it. They sought to profit from it. Allegedly, Amy Acton walked away from the state health department after a little while, certainly sometime in 2021, when maybe she didn't have it all figured out, but it didn't matter. She ran point on many horrible programs that got people killed, and Vivek Ramaswamy was doing the same thing with computer programs and seeking to profit from the entire crisis, which, of course, the entire thing was a giant lie, and that hasn't been acknowledged, which is why we consistently have an accountability crisis in this country, and that's a massive problem that stretches into every single working environment known to man. The other part about the primary, which is unfortunate, and I'll get a little more into the COVID response here in just a second, but you have some of the individuals, again, who are running on the ticket who ended up losing, who are basically reaching out to the current Vivek campaign, so to speak, and saying, hey, look, we're still out here. We want to go after the fraud. If you hire us, we can help. I'm telling you, the establishment is so strong that I don't see them hiring any of these people. I don't see the Vivek campaign or anybody in Vivek's so-called wannabe government here in Ohio hiring a Marcel Sturbich. I don't see them hiring Kim Georgeton either. So people have got to understand that you're either anti-establishment or you're with the establishment, but you can't suck up to the establishment for employment. I mean, that's not going to work either. So again, the whole thing is complicated, the whole thing is dirty, and I would even say this, and I'm not going to play audio from it, but I highly recommend that you watch the entire thing. And some opinions are shared, of course, and I'm not saying that both of these guys have it all figured out, but the latest interview between Tucker Carlson and Thomas Massie is very interesting, because Massie, again, gets into the Jewish lobby with specifics, specifically regarding, again, his own campaign, and the individual who's been propped up to run against him. He openly says the guy can hardly put a sentence together. He doesn't want to do a debate at all. He's got tens of millions of dollars behind him, certainly from the Jewish lobby, AIPAC, and other organizations, and Massie, of course, has none. But Massie, again, is more grassroots, and it certainly appears that way. I'm not claiming to know everything about Thomas Massie. I certainly don't know everything about Tucker Carlson either. But I do know this. When a guy shows up out of nowhere, going after a guy who's interested in fiscal responsibility like Massie, that usually means that that guy is a puppet, and the people funding him are very terrible. That's pretty much common sense, I think, there. So, again, he gets into the specifics of all of it. He mentions some rather tasteless comments that Donald Trump made toward Massie. And again, if those comments were really made, it's beyond awful, I think. But there's an awful lot of division right now within all of these primary races, and I can feel it, and it certainly feels like that's the case across the country. And unfortunately, this division is being driven by a lack of telling the truth. That everybody has different opinions about what's going on, but the truth isn't being told by those individuals who are directly involved. Now, there may be, again, logical reasons why that's the case. There may not be logical reasons why that's the case. There may be very secretive, horrible reasons why that's the case. Again, people are continuing to complain about data centers, and rightfully so. It seems to be arguably the number one issue across the country. And then again, you have all these other distractions like the so-called hantavirus, which is a complete lie. And then you have, again, UFO disclosure and blah, 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 and all that nonsense. And again, I'm not interested in any of that either, because the PSYOPs are still coming, they're still operational, and they're all designed, again, to distract and flood the minds of endless people, and again, cause division and a number of other things, and I just don't think that any of it is beyond helpful. But specifically regarding, again, the Ohio gubernatorial race here, and certainly as far as voter registration goes, here's the breakdown in the state of Ohio if you were interested. And again, you don't even have to live here to find this to be a bit fascinating, but it's completely divided. It says how many registered Democrats, Republicans, and Independents are there in Ohio. Now, apparently, as the story goes, there isn't any one system that specifically breaks down voters in any state by party line. There are polls that exist. There are some census bureaus that exist, I think, too. But, of course, that changes with time, and it changes with every election cycle. This particular post is basically stating that as far as registered Democrats are concerned, they make up approximately 31.12% of the population in Ohio, roughly 2,359,238 voters. Republicans make up 31.18% of the voting total here, with 2,363,776, with independents making up 2,857,941, or 37.7% of the total vote. People on X, certainly at the end of the week, were full-blown panicked about Vivek Ramaswamy actually losing to Amy Acton. They were openly saying, hey, look, if independents don't vote, then Amy Acton will win. And if independents, again, run away from Vivek Ramaswamy, then, again, Amy Acton will win. If voters for Casey Putsch don't vote for Vivek Ramaswamy, then Amy Acton will win. Now, again, as far as the gubernatorial race is concerned, I'm not concerned one way or another because I think that they're both puppets. I think, again, that they're both owned, and that's beyond evident. I'll vote for John Husted. If I vote, I'll vote for John Husted. Any Supreme Court pick, I think that's logical. I'll do the same thing. Holding a Senate seat and keeping Sherrod Brown out of Washington, D.C. would be a good thing. But of all of the registered individuals who, again, voted, apparently Sherrod Brown, running for Senate, got the most number of votes. But that's not surprising, because many individuals, certainly Democrats, go into a primary even when when their primary candidates, so to speak, aren't running against anybody, and they just get a lot of pride in, pressing those votes and checking those boxes for those individuals who aren't running against anybody who happen to be on a Democrat ticket. I mean, they get to do that, and that's fine, but that's not really indicative that Sherrod Brown is going to win or that Amy Acton would win. So, again, it's manipulation, it's number manipulation, and I'm not going to tell anybody what to do one way or another. I just know that when it comes to the governor race, I'm not going to vote in it because, again, both of these individuals are criminals, and like I said earlier, they were criminals when it came to the COVID lie. Case in point, if you don't follow this individual over on X, I highly recommend it. They are the Constitutionalist at We Will Be Free 24. Here's what they said regarding Ohio's COVID response. They said, Ohio's COVID response, who was the lockdown czar? Vivek? Let's get into it. There was a lot of revisionist history floating around since the primary election in Ohio. Here are the facts. March 9th, 2020, Governor Mike DeWine declared a statewide emergency and issued Executive Order 2020-01D, with only a few confirmed cases that ordered closures from March 12th through the 15th. Acton, who was appointed February 26 of 2019, issues a stay-at-home order on March 23, 2020 under the policies and directives of Mike DeWine. DeWine stated, quote, "I am the elected official. I set the policy. The buck stops here." Now, what's funny about that is I didn't stay home, and neither did anybody with a brain. But endless people did. And that's pathetic. Again, anytime I hear the term lockdown, I just laugh because I think to myself, really? You locked yourself down for what? It goes on, it says the Ohio COVID-19 response team had been created, the Corona Task Force. The primary advisor was Lieutenant Governor John Husted, again, now running for Senate. Around this time, Vivek Ramaswamy described himself as a private sector advisor working with John Husted and regularly joined DeWine and Acton at daily briefings. Vivek personally supported vaccines and masks. June 11th, 2020, Acton suddenly resigned as director of the Ohio Department of Health, stating the primary reason was intense pressure, including from legislators and interests tied to DeWine, to sign health orders she believed lacked scientific support and could violate her Hippocratic oath, do no harm. Vivek Ramaswamy has refused to give details on his policy recommendations while on the Ohio COVID team. Information has emerged citing Vivek for creating a national COVID-19 registry under his company, Datavant, pooling patient records to segregate people by their vaccine status. Datavant partnered with the NIH-funded National COVID Cohort Collaborative, providing record linkage technology for data to support research, quote-unquote, for the pandemic response, allowing those with immunity to, quote, get back to normal life, unquote. On May of 2023, Forbes reported that Vivek Ramaswamy paid the Wikipedia editor to scrub his work on Ohio's COVID response team from his page prior to his presidential run. On March 2025, Vivek's company Ryovant and its subsidiary Genevant announced a $2.25 billion global settlement with Moderna for unauthorized use of their lipid nanoparticle mRNA technology use in Spikevax. Genevant says it played a fundamental role in the pandemic response, i.e. the mRNA vaccines. Ramaswamy's wealth increased from $176 million, or by $176 million, I should say, in 2020. It's your personal responsibility, they said, to use your discernment as to who will be the most damaging to Ohio with the legislative powers in the State House going forward. Who is the most ill-intended, unquote. It's tough. That's a tough one because it's both. What I do know, again, is that Casey Putsch wanted to hire retired military and retired special forces individuals who live in Ohio and go state to state, border to border, east to west, west to east, north to south, and south to north, and go after child traffickers and work with police departments and arrest them and prosecute them, of course, and put them in prison, if not worse. I don't know why somebody wouldn't support that. He wanted to eliminate property taxes as well. He openly stated it on X with consistency. Again, shocked that people wouldn't bother looking into this, but this is the lazy part of the American voter, which is unfortunate. Ohio, by the way, is number 5 in the top 10 when it comes to the highest property taxes in the United States, with number 1 being Illinois. Number 2 is New Jersey, number 3 is Vermont, 4 is Connecticut, 5 Ohio, 6 is New Hampshire, 7 is Iowa, 8 is Pennsylvania, 9 is Nebraska, and 10 is New York. And as we know, property taxes are just one of the many problems. You have Somali fraud, you have healthcare fraud, you have Medicaid, Medicare fraud. And a lot of that, of course, is being facilitated by illegals and Somalis. As soon as I got done recording the episode for Friday on last Thursday, as soon as I was done, the acting attorney general in Ohio, Dave Yost, resigned. He has 8 months left in his term, and he just walked away. Now, there would be two reasons from two separate angles that he would quit, with 8 months left to go, right after the primary. Whatever it was, 2 days after the primary. And he's moving on to some other, I don't know, nonprofit lawyer group or something like that, some so-called accountability group. It could be that he's a good guy, and that he's just overwhelmed and his hands are tied because basically DeWine isn't letting him go after Somali fraud. Which, by the way, the AG's office can go after this kind of fraud very specifically, even though Dave Yost said that he can't. And as it turns out, that's not true. It says the following here: the AG can investigate organized criminal activities such as public corruption, large-scale drug conspiracies if directed by the governor or the Ohio General Assembly. Certain niche areas give the AG direct authority, such as some environmental crimes, Medicaid, welfare fraud, workers' compensation fraud, and certain patient abuse or nursing home cases. Courts occasionally appoint the AG as a special prosecutor in unusual circumstances. So again, when Yost says online, and he said it on his X account, and he has it pinned at the very top, he's basically telling people, stop emailing us and stop complaining because we can't go after all this Somali fraud. As it turns out, that's not true. But again, we also know that Mike DeWine doesn't want to appoint anybody specifically to go after it, which is the problem. So again, is he leaving because he's overwhelmed and he doesn't want to actually do anything on his own about it? Possibly. It's also possible that he just doesn't want to do anything about it because he can't. And so he's getting out of the way because he knows that he can't do anything about it. So somebody else is going to fill in and be a placeholder for the next 8 months until, again, probably Keith Faber or somebody else ends up being the Attorney General. And then again, what's going to happen after that? Probably nothing. The stories coming out again about Somali fraud in Columbus, Ohio, and throughout all of Ohio are overwhelming. The Daily Wire is all over it, the Washington Examiner. I mean, a lot of big outlets have been covering this for a very long time, but we're not seeing shackles on anybody. Yes, they've probably arrested a few, but they're not arresting the number of individuals that they could be arresting. They're not shutting down the properties. They're not cleaning out the buildings and arresting everybody inside. Again, all you need is probable cause. Seems like they have it. All this so-called, again, undercover footage, the Nick Shirley stuff, all of it. These individuals have these people behaving suspiciously in a building where they claim to be running a business, and then you open up the door to their so-called business inside of these buildings that are basically just giant office buildings, and there's nothing in there. It's like these famous scenes that you see in movies where individuals, again, are laundering money, or you have giant call scams, and they walk into a building and there's just telephones all on the floor. There's no office furniture, there's no carpet, there's no cubicles, there's nothing. It's just telephones. And they're all hooked in and they're all designed to make robocalls from one place to another, or just, again, basically ring and be an answering machine and an answering service where there's not a human being on the other end who actually picks up the phone. So these Somalis, again, are being paid to stay home and take care of their own family members who are so-called elderly, and then they're receiving Medicaid benefits as a result. They're stealing from American taxpayers. It's right in front of everybody's face. But nothing is being done. Now you have J.D. Vance basically saying, again, he wants to put together a task force and, attack Columbus, Ohio regarding all of this fraud. Okay, great. Where were you when you were senator? Same thing with Vivek. Vivek says it on a campaign trail to one or two people on camera. The fraud's a big problem. We got to go after it. Okay, what are you going to do about it, though? And why aren't you screaming at the top of your lungs now for the people who are there now to do something about it? This is the sad part of all of this. This, again, is the culture of a lack of accountability. It's demoralizing. And people are getting their everyday taxpayer dollars stolen. So again, just to summarize, if people think that Vivek Ramaswamy is going to come in and do a clean house of all of this fraud regarding all of these illegals, I think you're dreaming. And if you think Amy Acton's going to do the same thing, I think you're dreaming too. Again, two heads of the same snake. They were involved in the wrong things at the wrong time at the same time. And it's too bad. It's too bad that it's gotten to this point. Of course, it's always been this way. I'm fully aware. But even so, it's not improving. And until people wake up and start really voting for individuals who, again, are hardworking Ohioans and hardworking Americans within your state, and those are the individuals running against the establishment, people have got to wake up and stop voting for the establishment. Now, speaking of the establishment, certainly in the UK, and we have a problem, of course, with this, but the UK is in deep, deep trouble, and according to this article by RT, they are past the point of no return. It was titled, Britain's Population Replacement Has Passed the Point of No Return. Royal symbolism, protest crackdowns, and legal double standards point to the UK's deep national unraveling. Short little article here, again, nice little summary, and it's, again, horrific. It says, in 2026, the British monarch issued a public message marking Ramadan and Eid al-Fitr, I don't know, something. While Easter, unlike in all previous years, was no longer accompanied by a special royal address, only a brief greeting on behalf of the royal family was published for the Christian holiday. This pattern in the king's addresses to his subjects reflects not only the increased demographic and political weight of the Muslim community, but also a clear setting of priorities. The British monarch's refusal to deliver the traditional Easter address continues a policy that can hardly be described as anything other than anti-Christian and anti-national. When in Southport, the son of migrants from Rwanda carried out the stabbing of little girls at a children's club, all those who came out in protest, including the parents of the murdered children, were labeled alt-right-wing extremists. As part of the total retribution, quote-unquote, announced by the Prime Minister, 1,280 protesters were arrested, and to make room for them in the autumn of 2024, the government released around 2,000 criminals from prison early. In the spring of 2025, the government gave a final answer to those Britons who dared to say, quote, we want our country back, unquote. The Sentencing Council recommended that magistrates and judges take the ethnic and religious backgrounds of an offender into account when issuing verdicts, thereby enshrining privileges for ethnic and religious minorities instead of the principle of equality before the law. What we are seeing is a deliberate dismantling of the nation-state and the British nation through the replacement of the island's population. The House of Windsor is no bulwark of British tradition, but a crowned representative of the globalist oligarchy systematically and consistently implementing a strategy of transhumanism. The divergence between the capitalist elite and the mass of service populations, mixed together in megacities, stripped of historical memory and religious roots, and having voluntarily renounced the reproduction of a now superfluous humanity through a child-free lifestyle. It says the logical result of such a strategy is the final transformation of Britain from an icon of capitalist progress into an epicenter of growing social dysfunction. You can see this by examining RT's global survey, the Social Well-Being Index. While the West compares who has more money and greater opportunities for consumption, we measure what truly matters for the survival and flourishing of nations: the ability to produce life, birth rates, the preservation of life, infant mortality, longevity, homicide mortality, and the minimization of oppression, the level of inequality between rich and poor, and children's education. As a result, the great Western powers did not even make the top 20 in the SWI rankings. France is in 29th place, Germany 41st, the US 48th, and the UK 53rd, unquote. White nations, as you might imagine, and it's deliberate. That's why they're targeted the way that they are, and that's why, again, they seek to demoralize the people who live there. Now, again, I don't think Keir Starmer in the UK is going to last very long. I mentioned in a previous episode and read some posts having to do with him being tossed out sometime in the month of May. And here's a particular post also on X just from the other day from a Laird of the Manor 2.0. And they said, under Labour, rape offenses soared, illegal immigration spiraled entirely out of control, the economy flatlined, taxes climbed even higher, and Britain's wealth creators packed their bags and left in droves. So yes, Labour has just endured one of the most catastrophic political humiliations in modern British history. Frankly, the country should be grateful for it. In 2025, Britain limped along with a pitiful 1.3% growth rate, among the weakest in the G7. Meanwhile, a staggering 16,500 millionaires fled the country, taking an estimated $91.8 billion of wealth with them. The Channel crisis worsened yet again, with 41,472 illegal migrants arriving in small boats, up 13% on the previous year, while recorded rape offenses reached another grim record high. There's a direct correlation here. Some people can't see it. Yesterday, the electorate delivered its verdict with all the subtlety of a guillotine. Labour lost Wales for the first time in the party's history. Reform swept up more than 1,200 councillors. Labour hemorrhaged over 1,000 seats in what can only be described as a full-scale political collapse. Their national vote share cratered to somewhere between 15 and 17%. At a general election, figures like that would reduce hundreds of Labour MPs to little more than bitter memories and redundant LinkedIn profiles. In a single night, the party that once wrapped itself in the language of the British working class discovered, to its horror, that the working class had finally stopped listening. Keir Starmer now looks less like a prime minister in waiting and more like a man watching the floorboards disappear beneath his feet. Labour MPs have already begun circling like undertakers at a state funeral. Union allies issued the blunt warnings to, quote, change or die, while the Welsh Labour leader demanded a new direction mere moments after losing her own seat. And yet, there stood Starmer before the cameras, delivering his usual pre-programmed corporate drivel about how days like this don't weaken my resolve, unquote, sounding less like a leader and more like an automated customer service response. Even members of his own party branded him robotic and tone-deaf, quite right too. When a government makes its citizens poorer, less safe, increasingly voiceless, then dismisses their anger as prejudiced for daring to notice, it is no longer governing. It is insulting the intelligence of the electorate. Labour did not lose because of messaging. They lost because people experienced the consequences firsthand. In shrinking pay packets, in unsafe streets, in collapsing public confidence, and at borders that appear to exist purely as decorative suggestions. Keir Starmer's position is no longer sustainable, the country has spoken, and the message could scarcely be clearer, unquote. Again, I suppose it's only a matter of time before he's out. I would say that the U.S. presence in the Strait of Hormuz and Iran there has a great deal to do with it as well. Clearly, the London Bank doesn't like Keir Starmer anymore because the London Bank is losing power as well. They don't have control over the oil. But again, because of all of the division and the one-dimensional viewing of everything and the truth not being fully explained to the citizens of the world, certainly in the UK and in America, this is why, again, accountability is lacking here because the truth isn't being told and it's confusing people, which is creating the division. Again, if people were just told the truth about why we're really over there, controlling that entire area and all of those waterways to make sure that oil moves to where it's supposed to go freely and fairly and at the right price instead of some under-the-table price, then people would understand that. If people understood the history of admiralty law, they would understand this. If people understood that nuclear weapons don't exist and we're not really over there because we don't want Iran to have a nuke, quote unquote. I'm glad that, again, a Tucker Carlson has figured this out and openly said, Iran's not going to get a nuke. I don't understand why we're over there and blah, blah, blah. Well, take it a dimension deeper. And the fact is nukes don't exist. And that's really the reason why we're not over there. So ask yourself, why are we really over there? Have we really ever had a boat presence in the water over there? Again, the Promethean Action gals lay this out very clearly and lay out the full history. But it's not an accident that those gals are not invited on particular shows. It's because, again, a lot of these shows are gatekeeping programs. It just continues to beg the question again. We fully know that we are at war here and there's lots of different battles taking place at the exact same time. But which direction are we really moving in? Again, I would say that certainly from a global standpoint, we're taking more control as a country, which is a good thing. The problem is we have to focus on what's also going on within our own borders. And the faster that things seem to move at the global level, I think at least to some extent, the worse things are getting at the local level. So it just begs the question again, like in any battle, do you stretch yourself too thin? And is it possible in a case like this, certainly when it comes to a global war of which we're waging and continuing to exist in, against numerous deep states and communism and a number of other things, but can you stretch yourself too thin in a conflict like this? I'm not sure one way or another. It just seems like we're stretched too thin just based on what you see at the local level with the crimes piling up and the fraud and everything else that everybody sees at face value, and then again, a lack of prosecution and a lack of accountability. So I understand again that all roads lead to Obama from a global standpoint, and he was in wherever he was in Canada with Canada's prime minister and Alex Soros, and the three of them were meeting together and basically engaging in a coup, again, so to speak. I would find it very difficult to believe that Barack Obama wouldn't be surveilled by our military at this point. I wonder again if it's just for optics, if he's really being controlled or he's not, but either way, he has to be surveilled because he can't be trusted. Again, everybody's waiting for some arrests here. Everybody's waiting for a certain level of arrests that will create honest-to-God deterrence. And again, a Barack Obama going down for engaging in a coup against a sitting president, or certainly an individual who was running for president, that would be a massive arrest. But of course, you can't just take down one. You would have to take down all of the people that were around him who helped plan all of this and all of the people who knew, and if you could do all of that at the same time, Godfather style, then that would be pretty sweet. So, again, it's frustrating. I fully understand. It overwhelms me from time to time as well, and I just say, when is the levee going to break on all of this? Because it has to break sometime. But it doesn't help, again, that Donald Trump says particular things that seem to demoralize your average American, certainly when, again, for example, in the Massey case, when endless people want to vote for Thomas Massey. Again, he seems to be anti-establishment, even at face value. I find it hard to believe that he would be lying about such a thing. So, again, I don't know. It's all over the place and it's confusing. I'm going to move on, though, because this is equally as disturbing. And I think, again, this shows exactly what these tyrants have planned and what they're doing. And it shows, again, that we live in the United States of America, and not only do we have 50 different countries within one country, i.e. the states, of course, but given county and local control, you have God knows how many different countries within each state, depending on the number of counties in each state. Case in point, Oakland County, Michigan. Now, this was from the Gateway Pundit, and again, this is lengthy, but it's worth it. And it's horrific, because this shows, again, full-blown censorship and the arrest of an innocent individual who did not break a law. But again, this is the establishment and the masses versus the individual. And that's a difficult fight, and that's a difficult battle to win. It was dated May 8th, but it was titled Soviet-Style Trial in Michigan for Criticizing a Politician, a Horrifying True Story. It says the following here, quote, "There's an ongoing case in Michigan that should terrify everyone. Mark Aisen, I'm going to pronounce it Aisen, I think that's it, A-I-S-E-N, was arrested near his home in December of 2023, extradited to Michigan, and has been held pre-trial for over 2.5 years. Most Americans don't believe the system can be weaponized against ordinary citizens. Judges and prosecutors are given the presumption of innocence and good faith, while criminal defendants are given the presumption of guilt because if the government went after them, they must have done something wrong, quote unquote. The case of the people of Michigan versus Mark Aisen demonstrates just how far the system can crush a person with the process. Mark Aisen was gainfully employed and lived independently in Massachusetts. In his spare time, he did what countless Americans have done for generations. He wrote messages to politicians, nonprofit boards, and charity officials on behalf of himself and others, calling them out for what he sincerely believed was complicity in crimes, immorality, and threats to public safety. He volunteered with various organizations within his religious community and the parents' rights movement to advocate for policies. It says on July 26th of 2023, from his apartment in Massachusetts, Asen sent an email to Bloomfield Township, Michigan Treasurer Michael Schostak, if I'm saying that right. It says the subject line was, quote, Michael Schostak covered up sexual child exploitation in Jewish nonprofit, unquote. The email was not posted on social media. It was sent directly to 56 email addresses, including 23 official local government emails, 14 officials from community boards and homeowners associations, and 19 private individuals. Here is the full text of that July 26th email. It's pretty short. It says, quote, Michael Shostak's pedophile buddies are recommending child sex change experiments to kids and their parents, bespoking their tiny bodies with genital mutilation to make them more sexually appealing to the gay predators they are introducing them to. Michael Schostak is personally complicit in this evil scheme through his role at a secure communities network, quote unquote. He doesn't deny it. They advertise it on the jewishboston.com website. Jewish ? No, faggotry is against the Jewish religion, and this is precisely why. That apparently was the end of his email. It says Schostak received the email and forwarded it to Bloomfield Township Police Chief James Gallagher with the message, another email this morning, what are my options here, quote unquote. The option Schostak chose should alarm every American. On official letterhead, township letterhead, using his government email address and CCing the police chief and a sergeant, Schostak sent Asen this letter, quote, Mr. Asen, this letter serves as a formal notice to cease and desist from any communication to me, my family, my colleagues, constituents, or other associates. Your email messages are vile, certain hateful language, and are completely detached from any basis in fact. To be clear, I unequivocally deny your allegations as untrue and defamatory. It says, you are hereby on notice to cease all communications to and about me. I am also demanding that you immediately provide a retraction of your defamatory comments to those individuals to whom your defamatory falsehoods were sent. Be advised, I am prepared to take legal action, both criminal and civil, should you fail to heed this warning. Michael E. Schostak, Treasurer, Bloomfield Township, Michigan. Okay, so first of all, just very quickly, it's freedom of speech. He's allowed to say what he wants. If he's making an allegation of something like that, however, it would help if he had a little bit of proof. But what you don't do, of course, is you don't arrest them and jail them. And unfortunately, that's what happened here. It goes on, it says, notice that there is what is not in the letter, rather. Any mention of actual threats of violence. Shostak's objection was to the content of the criticism itself, language he called vile and hateful, and allegations that he called defamatory. Asen responded the way any American exercising his constitutional rights would. He forwarded Shostak's threatening email to even more public officials, Jewish organizations, rabbis, and media personalities. He reiterated his detailed allegations against Schostak, challenged him to refute them, and pointed out the obvious abuse by office. Quote, by copying the police chief and a sergeant of the Bloomfield Township Police Department on his official Bloomfield Township Board of Trustees letterhead, there was an obvious implication that the department works for him personally as private henchmen. It's an abuse of process, and a violation of his oath of office. Michael Schostak is threatening me with arrest. Criticizing politicians in public discourse is a civil right, not a crime. It goes on, it says, there were no threats, just strong criticism of a public official using the powers of his office to silence dissent. What happened next is straight out of a Soviet playbook. In December of 2023, 3 months after Asen's last email, Asen was arrested in Massachusetts, extradited to Michigan, and locked up in Oakland County Jail. Local news reported the arrest with headlines like, Massachusetts man arrested for allegedly harassing Bloomfield Township treasurer, falsely claiming an onslaught of emails filled with threats and accusations. They repeated Schostak's patently false claims that Asen had threatened his family, something he was never charged with. Well, again, this is why the media gets a hold of these things, and they don't do their due diligence either. Here are the charges themselves specifically. MCL 750.411S, unlawful posting of a message. For this felony charge, you can be imprisoned for up to 2 years for posting a message online that could cause just 2 unconsented contacts with a victim that makes the victim feel terrorized, frightened, intimidated, threatened, harassed, or molested. In other words, a public official simply claiming he felt frightened by criticism was enough to have a man arrested, hundreds of miles away, extradited, and imprisoned indefinitely pre-trial. The second charge may be even more offensive to the Constitution. MCL 752.796/752.797, using a computer to commit a crime. Give me a break. It's embarrassing. It says this law adds an additional 4-year felony enhancer. Here's the kicker. It can be applied even if the defendant beats the underlying criminal charge. Meaning, if the jury finds Mark Asen not guilty of unlawful posting a message, the jury can still convict him of using a computer, quote unquote, even though he didn't commit a crime. The judge can then sentence him for up to 4 years in prison. It sounds absurd, and he can be sentenced to 4 years for using a computer even without committing a crime. That is the actual law in Michigan. Aside from the unconstitutional nature of the crimes, the process was used to punish Asen. Even if Asen ultimately beats the charges, he's already served a lengthy sentence. Asen's public defenders, the prosecutors, and the judges all appear to have overlooked or ignored Michigan's own 180-day rule on pretrial detention. The law was passed to prevent what happened to Mark Asen. But a law meant to protect people from the system is meaningless because it requires the very same system to enforce it. And scene. Therein lies the problem right there. If the people who are supposed to enforce the law don't, you don't have a country anymore. And you can't vote your way out of that. It says, immediately upon entering the case yesterday, we filed an emergency motion on his behalf demanding his immediate release and dismissal of charges with prejudice. This case is so egregious that it's hard to believe that it actually happened in the United States of America and not the former Soviet Union, but it is. What I have set forth is just the tip of the iceberg of the constitutional violations in this case. The full story could fill a book, and one day it will. This case is bigger than Mark Asen. It's a warning to every American. Tyrannical governments always start with the vulnerable. Those they think no one will defend. Vague statutes are being weaponized to criminalize political speech and criticism of public officials. If they can do this to a man who simply emailed a politician strong criticism from hundreds of miles away, they can do it to anyone. The People of Michigan versus Mark Asen should be required reading. If you don't reform our broken justice system, if we don't reform, rather, our broken justice system, this type of weaponization will only escalate. I will continue to report on this case as it unfolds in the Oakland County Courthouse. That was put together by a Jonathan Gross, Esquire. Again, with no accountability, it'll get worse. This was just, it reeks very similar to the Crumbly case. They locked up the Crumbly parents, and the Crumblies didn't kill anybody. And they locked them up for years before going to trial and then threw them in jail and threw away the key. So, again, this is beyond disgusting, but Oakland County is a mess. Karen McDonald is a mess. She's an absolute lunatic. And the cops there are lunatics. Karen McDonald, of course, I believe is still the prosecuting attorney, the head prosecuting attorney there in Oakland County, but yeah, she's nuts. But I'm telling you what, if the 2020 election fraud is exposed in Michigan, which it better be, then you're going after that gang of women that run Michigan. Whitmer, Nessel, the lot of them. It's all of them. You have to round these people up. I've said it a million times. I'll beat this dead horse for the rest of my life. Deterrence is a real thing. And deterrence is a very good way to get individuals to knock themselves off when they know that they've engaged in illegal activity, and they, of course, don't want to go to trial, and they don't want to go to jail, and 1,000 other things. But at the same time, if you have real accountability in a state or in a country or any location, you send a clear message that what you think you're going to get away with, you're not going to get away with it anymore. That's not going to happen. Here's Exhibit A. Look what we did with Exhibit A. We're going to do it with you now. Because if you even so much as write about wanting to do something like this, or collude with a coworker or anybody about breaking the law, we're coming after you, and you're not going to get away with it. Too many people are getting away with too many things right now. And this is the demoralizing and divisive part about what's going on in our country, and it's over-flippin' Okay. Education. And again, we're going to continue this lack of accountability and this accountability crisis train here. There was this particular story from back in April, and it had to do with a Prince William County whistleblower parent who was essentially, again, I'm going to paraphrase this, but she was basically saying that the Americans with Disabilities Act was not being followed by the school district. She exposed this, and then she exposed the bribe that she was given by the school district for basically her willingness to stay quiet, signing a non-disclosure agreement to make sure that she could never talk about it, and then, again, attempting to give her $20,000 to keep her mouth shut about it. This is a huge problem. But as we know, American school districts are criminal organizations, and they would do something like this. They would settle for a certain amount of money with a non-disclosure agreement because they think that everybody can be bought. So this specifically, again, had to do with Prince William County in Virginia and a Dr. Kimberly Melman Orozco, if I'm saying that right, pulls back the curtain on how taxpayer money is allegedly being spent, not on students, but on millions in attorney's fees to cover up systemic violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act and the IDEA. It says the revelations go deeper, detailing a specific $20,000 offer made to her family in 2024 to drop complaints, provided she sign a restrictive non-disclosure agreement. This demand effectively aimed to silence her and her daughter's First Amendment rights regarding the district's conduct. With recorded proof and whistleblower testimony in hand, this testimony challenges the transparency and integrity of local leadership. Here is a clip of her speaking at a school board meeting and pointing out exactly what they were trying to do to her and her daughter in 3, 2, 1.
People don't know that you're spending millions of dollars on attorney's fees covering up your systemic violations to the Americans with Disabilities Act and the IDEA. I know about this because in 2024, you all, in one of those agendas, authorized, I don't know if it was unanimously or not, but you authorized and offered to me and my family $20,000. That's what you offered me to drop all of my complaints against you. And I see, Mr. Welk, you're nodding your head, yes, you offered it. But the contingency was, and this is what your administrator said on recording, that I sign an NDA with teeth, a non-disclosure agreement with teeth. Give up my First Amendment right, give up my daughter's First Amendment right, so that you can have a non-disclosure agreement about all your violations. What this audience also doesn't know, that I recorded you. I recorded you, Mr. Welk. I recorded the teacher, the whistleblower teacher who called me. I can't play those recordings here because in your agenda, you can't play recordings, but I am going to post them. I'm going to post them online for everybody to see and hear at some point. In one recording, the teacher told me, they're violating so many laws. You have such grounds. But she said, here's the thing. If anybody asks me about it, they don't know anything. I don't want to have to lie, but if anybody asks me, I'm going to deny everything you told me. So I recorded her. She said, your daughter's legal rights are being violated. That's in the transcript of what you told me. Your daughter's legal rights are being violated and they don't care. They want to sweep it under the rug. They want to shut me up. That's what your teacher said. And instead of settling that claim, you proceeded to spend over $500,000 in attorney's fees to keep it quiet. You offered me a pittance of $20,000 to sign an NDA with teeth. Mr. Wilk, in the recording of you said, obviously, I know you're a very formidable person. I obviously think you have the best interests of children and your daughter, and of course, everyone in mind. That's what you said to me, Mr. Wilk. You also said it's not a secret that you and Dr. Lateef don't like each other. It was a secret to me. You said, we don't get along, but it's public. It's public. That's in one of the recordings. You told me you blamed him for the violations. I also contacted, I only have a few minutes left, Willie Deutsch, former board member. He said the school admin can be the worst at retaliated, way too focused on the institution over children. They said that parents will keep on removing their kids in disgust. I'll continue these conversations until these audio recordings are public. Thank you.
Turns out the county picked the wrong fight with the wrong person. She's an expert witness in human trafficking, apparently, and she was also the author of a book titled Hidden in Plain Sight, America's Slaves of the New Millennium, having to do with child human trafficking, among other things, I'm sure, of which we know the American school system is directly involved. This is why they have their whole gay agenda. This is why they have their transgender agenda. It's all designed to sexually groom people. Because, of course, that's exactly what these environments are filled with, sexual groomers. That's the point. And, as one might expect, as a result of all of that and all of this cultural demonic shift that's occurred in the business of education, endless people are leaving the profession, as I've always brought up, and endless people who are in the profession, again, are disgusted with what's going on and the lack of accountability. And that leads me to this. This is 7 minutes long, some audio I want to play here, almost 8 minutes long. Short little documentary titled A Growing Behavior Crisis in Wisconsin Classrooms. This was put together just a few days ago from the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. And again, listen to the lack of accountability. This is purposeful plan here. This is part of the demoralization. And this is exactly why students are not learning within these environments. And if they think they're learning, they're actually not. They're not learning about the real world, which is the unfortunate part, because once they get out in the real world, students are not going to be treated the way that they're being treated within these environments called schools. They will be fired. They will be thrown in jail. They will be trespassed from property. This is when the reality hammer is going to smash on all of them, among many others. Give this a listen in 3, 2, 1.
I was crouched down helping another student who was working on the floor, and she came up and pushed me from behind. These are kids. We want to forgive them and, allow them to come back in. That's really hard to then let them come back in when we all sort of felt unsafe.
Cries for help inside a Milwaukee public school as chaos unfolded.
Concern in Kenosha. 2 middle school students arrested for making threats at Kenosha schools.
2 teachers coming forward tonight with safety concerns about their jobs.
Some parents say they're afraid to send their kids to school and want change.
In Wisconsin education, we have noticed a concerning trend. The number of teachers willing to work in public schools is going down. Test scores are going down, but the incidence of behavior issues and classroom disruptions and safety concerns are going up.
I think for teachers, that is their biggest struggle, having to try and figure out what to do with these behaviors that maybe they don't even understand within their classroom.
As a teacher, it isn't fair for a child to see me get blatantly disrespected time and time again. And your good kids eventually shut down and have a hard time because they don't want to see their teacher being disrespected.
But you ask any teacher, when they go home, what really gets under their skin, it's when they told a student to sit down and the student looked at them and said, no, and then went and sat elsewhere. Because what does that communicate to the teacher? It communicates you're not worthy of respect.
While there were many teachers that didn't want to share their names, their schools, or even be on camera, which really speaks to the larger issue here, they don't feel comfortable speaking out. Many others were willing to come forward and share their story with us.
There has been a pretty deliberate effort on the part of administration and districts as a whole to reduce suspensions and to reduce disciplinary incidents. And that's for the purpose of being able to show data to the media and decision makers that the situation is improving.
When they would tell us not to report certain behaviors, it would kind of undermine us as teachers. We would feel as though then we are setting the precedent that that's acceptable in our classrooms.
But then administration, it is absolutely their job to deal with these behaviors. That's why we have deans of students. That's why we have vice principals. If it was 100% up to the teachers, then go ahead and get rid of those positions and give me their salary.
I think there does need to be some transparency in here are the policies, here are the procedures, here's what we're doing for teachers to help and empower them to do better. However, I think without administrative support, behaviors can't get better until you have things in place to deal with the behavior at hand. Otherwise, all learning is going to stop.
Beyond just teaching, these teachers are the disciplinarians. They are the ones that are in charge of maintaining their classroom and maintaining an environment that's conducive to learning. But when you have the backup of the administration and the higher-ups, it makes that job that much more palatable and easier to do.
Sending a kid back to class immediately after they've been kicked out is probably the single most detrimental practice that any administrator can carry out to undermine a teacher's authority.
I have had to intervene in fights several times. One of the common aspects of the fights that occur in the schools is it's usually not just one student fighting another student. These are often multiple students ganging up on one student or multiple students fighting multiple students. I've had to intervene many times and have been injured before doing so.
That can be a huge problem, and you get enough of those kids that are doing that type of stuff and there's no consequences for it, nobody's held accountable for it, it's easy to lose control of a class.
There's been situations where we're kind of told, well, that's cultural. They fight, they swear, we can't really do that. That's, that you just have to accept that that's the way that is. That's how they were raised. Well, no, because someday they're going to graduate high school and the police department is not going to ask for an IEP. They're not going to ask how they were raised. And so if these kids aren't learning these consequences now, they're going to learn in a really not great way once they leave high school.
Is hosting a series of fairs to fill the gap of a major teacher shortage.
Yeah, the district has at least 85 teacher vacancies.
I was trying to be a positive role model for them. But when you get called bad words all the time for months, I just couldn't take it anymore. My mental health, it wasn't doing very well. My health physically wasn't doing well. I was even losing hair.
So when I was teaching, there were times where I felt like I just was being incredibly ineffective.
We're not superheroes, right? We don't have special powers. You can only do as much as you can in a 24-hour day.
We actually saw from a report gathered on exit surveys from Milwaukee Public Schools that a top reason that teachers are leaving the profession in general is because of personal safety concerns. This is not a theoretical threat.
I left public school and took a huge pay cut to go to private school because the environment is drastically different.
All of the surveys that I've seen have put behavior as the number one reason that teachers consider leaving the classroom. It's above stress, it's above pay, it's above politics.
And we think we're helping these kids, and what we're doing is hurting them. Every time that we allow a student to act inappropriately, to be disrespectful, to break the law, and to not hold them accountable, we think we're being kind. It is the worst form of abuse because we are not preparing them for adulthood.
If nothing changes, we are going to deal with the negative outcomes of students being uneducated, students going to school and learning that school is not a place where they can gain skills and knowledge that's going to help them.
I feel like for teachers to feel supported in public schools, teachers need to feel backed up by parents, administration.
If nothing happens, teachers will continue to leave the profession, which will be a huge disservice to students across the state of Wisconsin.
We need to feel like we are safe when we go to work. We need to feel like children are safe.
Not only do we feel so much pressure, we just know that it's almost impossible to get to where they want these kids to be or to get these schools to where they want to be because the big problem is not being dealt with.
If your school policy and your district policy is a lack of accountability for everybody across the board fairly, certainly the most egregious offenders, why is it that they would be teaching children that? Again, look at what is happening at the government level among adults in every state, in every county. These are all human beings who have been taught a lack of accountability, which is why they have no problem breaking the law. They're void of a conscience. They don't have an inner monologue telling them this is wrong. And then they again take advantage of the people around them, create hostile working environments. This is literally a taught characteristic within American schools. It's not just happening in the home. It's literally happening within American schools on purpose. That's the point. That's the big connection and the big leap that unfortunately those teachers that you heard in that audio clip there, that's the leap that they can't make. I feel terrible for them. But the answer to the why question is it's on purpose. It's being done on purpose to create adults who operate with no accountability whatsoever, believing that there will never be accountability, and that they should be, again, in that group that believes, don't hold people accountable because you'll get ahead. Don't worry, we'll give you a diploma as a minor. Even though we didn't hold you accountable, you'll get the same diploma as everybody else. So when you get out in the real world, that should be your expectation also. That you can step on people and still get ahead. You can take advantage of people and still get ahead. Again, the people who run these school districts operate that way too. This is the message being sent. They're teaching that kind of a civil war and a societal war and a societal division within schooling environments. And again, it's being done on purpose. And here's another example of the on purpose and the demoralization of the entire business and minors in general, and of course manipulating them and the people around them who do the manipulating, i.e. their teachers. This is from South Carolina, ABC Channel 4 just 2 days ago. Give this a listen in 3, 2, 1.
Well, parents, you need to hear about this story that has a lot of people talking tonight. A bill that is now in the hands of the governor will change grade scales across the state. The question at the center of it, should a student receive a 50 for work even if they never turned it in? Thank you for joining us. I'm Ashley Ryan. First at 5, that debate now front and center in South Carolina after lawmakers passed the controversial education bill aimed at ending grade floor policies statewide. It is the first of its kind in the nation. News 4's Emily Deanne has been digging into what is now one step away from becoming law. So, Emily, break this down for parents. What is a grade floor policy, and what does it mean for their students?
Ashley, grades earned versus grades given. That's at the center of this education battle in South Carolina as House Bill 5073 awaits Governor Henry McMaster's signature. What's known as a grade floor policy would ban South Carolina school districts from requiring teachers to give students a minimum grade higher than what they actually earned on assignments and tests.
So-called grade floor policies have become common in school districts nationwide, often setting the lowest possible grade at 50 or 60%, even when students turn in little or no work.
On its face, though, it may seem like a compassionate thing to do, like, oh, maybe they were sick, they had some other family emergencies, what have you. It's really kind of setting these kids up for failure. long term.
Public policy researchers at Palmetto Promise Institute say in South Carolina, 6 school districts, including Dorchester District 2, currently use grade floor policies, while dozens of other individual schools have enacted their own rules on grade floor minimums.
If we start masking their child's performance, like you got a 60% in reading, maybe that child is actually way behind in reading and needs some intensive interventions that maybe the parents wouldn't know because it's being hidden by these minimum grade floors.
Now, lawmakers have passed House Bill 5073, which would ban districts from requiring teachers to give students grades they did not earn.
And it's setting low expectations. It's giving them the idea that, oh, if I don't perform in my job, I hope I'll still get paid and it'll be fine. And that's just really not the case.
Supporters say the message restores academic accountability and ensures grades accurately reflect student performance. Critics argue it could make it harder for struggling students to recover academically. DD2 said in a statement, in part, should the legislation be signed into law, they will review their policies and make any necessary updates to ensure compliance. Districts that violate the policy could lose 10% of their state aid to classroom funding.
The bill also creates a statewide task force to review South Carolina's grading policies and recommended additional changes aimed at improving college and career readiness standards in public schools. Governor McMaster signs the legislation into law. The policy would take effect July 1st ahead of the 2026-27 school year. Emily Deanne, News 4.
Yeah, it should be banned. It shouldn't have been there in the first place. But it was there designed, again, to raise the scores of black students. They'll never admit it. They don't want to race specify, but it's true. And of course they would say, well, it's for all students. It's to give all students a leg up. But it's every single school district, by and large, where the vast majority of the students happen to be black. That's why those policies exist. That's why they were implemented in the first place. And the left created that. And like the guy said, this creates a long-term problem. But that long-term problem is not just laziness and a lack of accountability, but it's overall demoralization as they continue to get older, and then you create a corrupt child into a corrupt adult. That's the entire purpose. That's how you destroy a nation. You start with children, you work your way through their entire life, you get them to believe things that are not real, then you can control them, manipulate them, and then they provide nothing other than illegality. Even if they hold a position of influence, making a good deal of money, maybe even within law enforcement or government or the legal profession or whatever it is. It's taught, not just within the home, but purposefully within government schooling. I'll end with this. This was a post on Reddit Teachers just a few minutes ago, actually, as I was recording this, fits perfectly. It was titled, "Is it normal to be so unhappy about this profession as a new teacher?" They said the following, quote, "This is the last year of my bachelor's in education social studies and my second year as a student teacher. This year I was placed in a public school in a low-income neighborhood to teach 10th grade social studies, and so far it's been a nightmare." This is the indication, by the way, that this person should not do this for a living. It says the students are generally behind what's expected for their age, which is unfortunately common in many public schools, and I think that part is manageable. The real problems are elsewhere. Number one, punctuality. I teach them on Tuesdays and Fridays during first period. Half the class is always 15 to 20 minutes late. And when they arrive, they have no idea what's going on. Meanwhile, the students who are there on time don't want to participate because there are so few of them that they feel singled out. Number two, they don't follow instructions. They refuse to work with classmates outside their friend group, even when certain groups clearly need to be separated because they're disruptive together. They simply refuse to move. What am I supposed to do? Physically drag them to another seat? I also ask them to read aloud, and if they don't want to, they just say, nah. And then they wrote, leaving me standing there like a fool. Number three, behavior problems. One student called me over to ask a question, and while I was helping them, a friend sitting next to him started insulting him right in front of me. Apparently that's funny to them. When I confronted him, He wouldn't even look at me while I was speaking. Later, as I started packing my things to leave, that same student began clapping and saying, "Yeah, it's finally over," quote unquote. And number 4, lack of motivation. Most of the students are not terrible. They can complete activities and behave more or less appropriately, but nothing I do seems to motivate them or make them genuinely interested in learning. It feels like an enormous effort just to move the class forward inch by inch. Honestly, it feels humiliating. I'm 23 and already starting to hate my profession. I know teaching doesn't always have to be like this because last year I worked with an amazing group of 10th graders. But this group and this school environment in general have been absolute hell, unquote. The first person responded and said, "Now imagine doing it for 34 more years. Get out while you still can." Another person said, "I'm unhappy about it as a 10-year teacher." And the last comment said, "This is it. This is the job. I suggest getting while you're still young enough. I'm 42, and at this point, I'm locked in. I wish someone would have told me that education would go to shit in literally less than 20 years, unquote. Yeah, this is a person who most certainly needs to get out of the business. And what they don't see in one environment, they will probably end up seeing in another. And what they do see in one environment, they will see in another. Again, just because they're in one bad environment now as a student teacher doesn't mean that they're not going to see other bad things in another, again, seemingly nicer looking school in a nicer area. Again, it doesn't matter what the weather is. It doesn't matter what the pay is. There's always corruption behind the scenes, and it's only a matter of time before they actually see it. There's also this aspect. There was a generational shift, of course, the Great Awakening, and an awakening aspect that all has to be taken into account when it comes to this profession as well. The education profession and the students, again, being taught now are not being taught by the sharpest knives in the drawer these days. They're being taught by younger teachers who have had technology in their lives their entire lives. They haven't had real-world experiences even. So they can't bring personal experience of, again, corruption, unfairness, a number of other things to bear within a classroom setting and use that within a classroom setting to show students that this is what the real world actually holds. This is why you have teachers bringing up, again, their personal habits, their personal lives, and their sexual preferences and their political ideologies to the classroom, because that's all that they know, and that's all that they have to share. They don't have anything else. Again, it isn't all of them. It's not all of them that still remain in this profession that behave that way and behave unprofessionally. That's not it. But it is enough to make a permanent damage, and it is enough to sway things in a negative direction, and it is enough to destroy a country. And it's working. So no, it can't be reformed. You can make all these little inroads. You can, again, change the grading for the negative, change the grading for the positive. You can play ping pong with all the policies you want back and forth and outlaw particular things and, again, make things seemingly look better, but that's not going to fix anything. The problem is too systemic. It's too entrenched. And the reason for that is on purpose. It's designed to be that way. Like I said before, you're going to see it in graduation dances and graduation ceremonies and the twerking and the table flipping and the chair throwing. I mean, you're going to see all that nonsense within all of these environments, but you're also going to see the man stand up against the masses. Some student, because it happens every year, goes viral for standing up at a lectern and giving a speech calling out the entire environment for not being safe, not teaching them about the real world, it being a complete waste of their time. And then they let everybody have it. And then what you hear in the crowd gives everybody away for their lack of knowledge. And actually their, whatever you would call it, their status of awakening, so to speak, is when one of those truth speeches gets told, you'll hear some people go, "Oh, I can't believe they're doing that, oh," and they get all nervous. Because those are the individuals that are too cowardly to do it themselves. And then you'll hear straight up applause. And then those people applauding are the ones who know better. Those people applauding are the ones who are awake. And then you'll hear boos and people booing the individuals and the children specifically giving those speeches. Those people are the ones who are dead asleep. Those are the ones who are enslaved and beholden to a school environment and believe that it is the be-all, end-all of their lives. That's a huge problem. So keep an ear out for those speeches, and as they start to come out here this month, feel free and email me links to those particular speeches, or if you have my phone number, you can text me, but you can certainly email me. I'll play all of that audio on the show. I love this time of year because this is when people start to wake up, and this is when people realize that you don't have all the friends you thought you had, and when all these school environments basically try to make it look like they've brought everybody together and they've helped everybody. They haven't. They've misled because they've been misled, and in many cases, they don't even know it. That's why it's brainwashing, and that's why brainwashing is highly effective. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening as always, and I'll catch you on Wednesday. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.